In our last activity, we were working to understand the importance of establishing your large value, uh, integrated value design. That is to say, having specific value levels that define the sense of space and the realism of the scene, even though it can be very simple. And so we're going to do the same thing again, mix up six values. We'll identify the three main values: the middle, uh, the darkest, and the light. And but we'll even go from there. Start the painting as a notan design. We'll take all the dark, medium dark to dark values and establish that, and then the light value, and then that we can analyze the design at that point if we feel it has interesting relationships. So basically, on our value scale, um, from about this value 4 on this scale is going to be on notan darks, and then from all the way to the up to value 10 on this side will be the light areas, and then later we'll break them down into smaller values, depending on how detailed, how many smaller shapes you want in your painting. But that's how we should think about the paintings, as shapes from large to small, and then texture. That's your some detailed texture, and process your paintings that way. So the first thing I'm going to do, we're going to work with this kind of mountain scene. And what I've done here is here's the original photo. Then I blurred the photo somewhat so I could just see shapes and not a lot of little small detail. I could see the main shapes. And then I just desaturated so we could see the value shapes. So we're going to use the principle of what we did in the previous. We're going to go a little more complicated and use a more naturalistic scene and see how to proceed that way. So the first thing I want to do is transfer this, and I'm not taking the time to worry about showing how to really draw that yet. We'll just because we're just working with this idea of the values. So what I'm going to do is outline what are the major shape areas, and this is where you have to do some interpretation. Obviously, right through here, you see the middle dark value all through here. So that will be an area we'll define. Okay. And then at first, we don't really need to necessarily put in smaller little shapes. We can add those later. We're just trying to actually just determine the overall large shapes. Um, so this middle value kind of goes up into here. It gets a little darker up here. And even here, the edges, I'm going to make them very smooth them out, not make them so detailed in terms of the contours. Um, this kind of goes up here. Trying to really simplify. There is this kind of dark area here. So what I'm doing is I am outlining all the areas that I consider to be the going to be the darks. And that's the notan, right? Which is light, dark, black, white. So all the darks within this range here to value 4, I will include in that. Okay, so that these dark shapes here, I also will include in that, but I'm going to go ahead and also draw these in so that when I go to paint those darks, I can see the lines underneath. And once again, it can be kind of generalized, um, because in terms of the contours, we will look at those later and decide how much really detail in the actual contour we want, the edges. So do we want it a little more straight and abstract? Do we want a little more curves? That's what we're going to determine later. Now, in this area here, there's a little bit of a decision you have to make. Is that in the light or is that in the dark? So I'm going to leave this in the light. And probably I'll maybe leave these for right now. I'm squinting at it and I'm looking at whether I really want to put that in and whether that works to put in here. Um, this, I might include this in the darks so that I can define the face of this mountain a little better. But I think maybe that's all I'll do. And I'm not sure I really like this popping up, but I think it still would work. Okay, so, and then I want to make sure I create the outline for the darks. And then I need to draw the outside edges of the format here that we're going to use. Okay, and I will also, of course, create the outlines for the light, the subtle changes in the light area, so that later as I paint, I can see those lines. These semi-dark shapes, I'm trying to unify those a little bit. Like so. Okay. And then down here, these little dark shapes are going to be important to make sure this area isn't too blank, just too open. Okay. Okay, now keep my reference over here. Now what I want to do is actually darken these lines up because as I paint over them, I want to be able to see. Later we'll talk about different ways to view your drawing in the painting because you could put a tonal wash on it, let it dry, then draw over that. Or you could have this drawing underneath and then start with thin layers so that you can see the drawing underneath. Or if you're really good at drawing, you can actually just start painting in shapes, but you have to really you need to ahead of time work out some sketches to know where you want to go with that. Because, you don't want to have to constantly be repainting and scraping out paint and everything necessarily, although that is a method. Okay. See how I'm thinking of just shapes. See these main shapes, no detail. Okay. Then I'll take my tape off the borders here, or the outline to the picture format. Okay. Now the next step is I'm going to mix up a 6-value scale on this palette. And then we'll go from there. We've already done that previously, so I won't show all of that, but I'll start here and go around. The important thing to remember again is your palette needs to have a logic to its organization. So I made the palette vertical so that I could include more in the video frame here, or get a more of a close-up. And so I'm going to start here and go around the edges here. If your palette is horizontal, you just do the same thing. Put your paint towards the top so that you have the mixing area in the middle. Okay, so I put the white and the black here, and I'm going to go around the top here. But I thought I'd go back over this again. When you're mixing the dark value from the black, okay, it's a very dark value. It would take a lot of white to lessen that. So it might be better to start with some white to begin with, then add some black into it and move it towards dark. You can see how much the black already tints that quite a bit, but that's probably not dark enough for that value. So I'll add a little more. Maybe a little darker. Now, you can't really know 100% until you start going around and doing all the values and then kind of compare them. Okay, so maybe I'll work with that. And then same thing to the next darker value. I had some black on there, so I'll just go with that. So each value has to be different, a little different in darkness than the previous. And there needs to be enough of a difference. Now this is almost the same, so I'm going to have to add some white back to that. Still pretty close, maybe a little bit more. Okay, then for here, there I can just add a little bit of this paint to it. So I need 6, so it's the black to start with, 3 darks, then 3 lights. So I'm going to bring this over here so I can do another light over here. And when we go to paint, we won't even this white here, it won't be pure white. It'll have a little value in it. I think that takes a little more. Need more white. Okay, so you can see there needs to be enough difference in value in each one, all the way from the white, which won't be pure white, to the black. Now, you can also use a value scale to help you. This is a 10 value scale. So you see even their white here is not pure white. So you could kind of roughly use every other value, although you have 6 here. But that can kind of help you to mix your values. But basically, if you start with the black, make a dark that isn't black, but it's dark, and then move yourself down. Okay, so I'll use a combination of this gel, only so that I can get it to dry fast. even with just the thinner, it's going to take a while. It'll take a little while to dry. Okay, so I'll use the gel to dry and a little solvent to make thin the paint. So kind of a combination. And if you look here, what I want to do now, this is where I want to start with my larger Noton um, approach to give me my white, my lights and my dark design just to start with. Okay. And the brush size. So in these areas, I could use a larger brush, but since I'm going to come up into here and paint some of these smaller shapes, I'll use maybe about this size brush. I don't want it too small. If I use a really small brush, I'm doing a lot of scrubbing to try to get the paint in there. So this one's probably a good size. It could maybe be a little bigger. Once again, it isn't that we're trying to perfectly do a coloring book thing where we're getting every edge perfect. That doesn't make the painting better. We're just trying to get the main shapes in there, and we'll adjust the edges as we go. So um, I'm going to start with this probably middle value here. Add some of the dryer, add a little to make it brushable. Let's see how that looks. Okay, now what I want to do is thin this enough so I can see through down here. So that does kind of obscure it. So I might use my use the napkin or a towel to kind of wipe that a little bit so I can see the drawing underneath. Okay. Now we could, if we wanted to, we could actually tone this whole format here, a middle tone, middle value tone. We could add the lights, that would give us our Noton, then add the darks. So there's different approaches to doing this depending on, your final outcome, what you're trying to get to. But here, this is more just a direct way to say, okay, middle value, dark value, light value. It's not exactly has to be, or what I'm showing you, it doesn't mean that this is the only way to do it. It's more like getting us to understand what the principle is in terms of these main value areas as the basis for the overall design of the painting. Okay, then it goes up here. So painting thin to start with is a good idea because it, well, in this case, allows us to see the drawing underneath, but also it just, without committing a lot of paint, you're identifying your design. The question is, at this point, do I want to include this area? I could include because it's pretty dark. Do I want to include these other areas? And I would say probably that will work pretty well. So it probably helps define the design a little bit more. So I actually jumped way out of what this value is. So you can see here, this value is much lighter. but I added that into this middle tone to kind of maybe define a little bit more of my notan. Um, it might not be that important to do that if I were to wipe this out. Okay, so but at least what I'm doing is seeing this main light dark uh, design relationship. It's really important to see the design, constantly looking at the design as you go along. Okay, so now the next step would be to go to my light area, but what I'll do is take this middle value or light in the light area, but not super light, because I always can add lighter areas. And then, oops, bring that in, add more solvent. Make sure I can still see these edges. The paint strokes don't have to be super precise at this point. You're just trying to get it laid in there. But you do want to, refine it enough so you see the major design here without a lot of fluctuations. Like this whole light area should be pretty even. So you can just see and then down here. Okay, so by doing it this way, you end up with little softer edges, a little more painterly edges, than just coming in the main shapes and just painting them directly in. This might be something you want to have to start with to keep the painting loose, and then slowly refine edges and so forth. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so right now it's just kind of very designy. I might darken this up a little bit so this looks more even. Okay, then up here. Okay, now I'm going to come in and paint the darks, but I can't see the drawing, so I'm going to have to. And here, where if I start to lose some of the edges, I can look at my original here. Okay, so I'm going to come in with this, not the black, because I always want to paint either light or dark into the main shapes. If I go one way, then I just have to go light, but sometimes it's good to be able to come back and paint the dark. So want to add some of this. Now this can be a little thicker paint, but doesn't, not super thick, but a little thicker. So once again, we're not hyper concerned about perfect edges because we can fix that later, or not even fix, it's just decide how soft or hard you want the edges to be, because we're going to paint over all this. Okay, and those are your darks. Now that gives you your three values to start with. Now I'm going to switch brushes here. Okay, so three values. Now let's say we want to now do some variations. Now we want to look at our next larger shape areas. And one of the larger shape area here that you can barely see the shape, but there's a change in value here is at the top. So that would be a value a little darker than this light value, which is up here. Now I can see my line through, or the drawing through the first layer here. So I'm not doing anything like trying to blend per se, or make something look like has a blended edge or anything. I'm just still thinking of shapes, and then worry about that later. Okay, and this goes here. Okay, now these little shapes are a little lighter. And then this is a little darker here. Okay, now down below here, we also go a little darker. And see, I'm painting in, what are those shapes? Those lighter shapes. Now, I didn't originally draw those or transfer those because I planned on just looking at it and painting it in later. Oops. Okay. Okay, it's in this little shape here of the crevice lightens up a little bit. So you can see that it's pretty easy to start to do variations on values if you already have your values kind of mixed and ready to go. But I'm still thinking of painting just in shapes. Kind of moving into the medium, the smaller shapes that kind of define some of the areas. Now, what's happening is that as I do this, the paint's pretty wet. So once I paint in some of these large to smaller shape areas, then I would probably want to just let my painting dry and then come back tomorrow. And that's why I want to put that medium in so that tomorrow I can come back and paint into it. It's a little darker up here. Not that dark. Okay. Then in this large, um, medium, dark shape that we started with, there's some darker values in there. So that's where I can mix kind of in between value, see where the shape is, and paint the shape in there. So everything is about painting, looking and finding shapes to paint, small to large, or large to small, rather. So my strokes get to be just painting a smaller shape, just with the paintbrush and the strokes I'm using. Okay. Now this is kind of the stage I'd probably leave it at until it's dry, and then when I came back the next day, I could come in with very strong dynamic strokes to kind of adjust things. But I want to keep it loose. And this area up here seems to be even a little bit lighter to me. Now, if I really wanted to go in with a couple of small areas. I can take a smaller brush, like up in here. Kind of define those areas that's a little too light. Okay, everything, think of shapes. And that's why these flat brushes are pretty good, because if you want to get a little bit more of a crisp edge shape to start with, it's a really good way to do it. Some painters like the Filberts, the softer edge. That's fine too. It just kind of depends on the look you're going for. Okay, so I don't try to get too fussy with this to begin with, because I'll go back into it. These areas will modulate a little bit with some lighter value shapes. Again, same thing, the shapes. That sky's pretty just straightforward, bland. We could, add some variation to it, but right now I wouldn't want to do that. Okay. Let's take off the tape. So that's a basic kind of block in. Okay, so basically I'm blocking in the large shape, the notan, three main shapes, then the in-between shapes. Okay, so you have the dark and the light, notan, and then you do the dark, middle, value, light, and then you go into the in-between shapes and paint those in. And this is a good process for working a painting. And once again, we could start a little differently.